attended by people from all corners of their lives, whether or not they could produce a fresh invite. Once invited, always invited, he and Amy had said. The Timkins had a 3-bedroom, 8th-floor apartment on West 77th Street between Central Park West and Columbus, the Balloon Block. It was where those cloud-sized cartoon characters from Macy's Day Parade were inflated the night before Thanksgiving. And nearly all the residents would open their apartment doors to anyone and everyone they knew. Timken grew up in the apartment, which his parents ceded to him 6 years earlier when they moved to Naples, Florida, and had attended his first balloon party at age 6. Now he was 34. Timken had been too depressed to tell anyone the dismal news, and in truth he'd convinced himself that Amy would return, apologetic or demanding an apology, which he would provide, and they would make up at dinner and in bed that night, and it would all blow over. He couldn't even remember what they'd fought about, only that it was insignificant and he had been right. The first 2 days after Amy had walked out, Timken rode his bike around the island of Manhattan in a fog, dodging trucks and taxis, heading down to Battery Park through Chinatown and the Village, and then up 6th Avenue. He was at least in part on the lookout for Amy, but he did not go by the building where she worked. On day 3, he went into his office and tried to keep busy, but mostly just stared at the phone and composed on his computer the germs of letters to Amy, alternating fragments of forgiveness and bitterness. The guests would begin arriving at 9, and so at 6, Timken went by himself to the Pioneer Grocery on Columbus to get Coke and Sprite and Scotch and beer and wine, then over to Cinderella for assorted cheeses and pâtés, a few flatbread pizzas, caviar, salmon, the oily dill-covered kind they called gravlax, dips, crackers, bread and carpaccio, and pumpkin and pecan pie. Spent a fortune, but he could pull this off. He would make the best of a terrible situation, and he could tell us something, that he'd get through this, though he wasn't convinced he would. The balloons and the alcohol might be a distraction, no? Could you stay depressed with a decent scotch in your paper cup and underdog smiling overhead? You could, of course, and then he wondered, did he have to tell them? Eventually he'd need to if the break was real, but telling everyone now is a bit like telling people you were pregnant 1 week after reading the home pregnancy test. So many things could change, and anyhow, would it harm anything for the purposes of the party to say his wife was away for a few days on business? Amy worked in advertising on the account side and was quite often away. Away for Thanksgiving? She'd be back on Thursday evening at around 6:30, Timken decided, and they'd have dinner with Amy's parents on the east side. She was heartbroken that she couldn't be there, he'd tell his guests, and they would all toast to her. It could work, Timken thought. He pictured Amy arriving at Kennedy in her red wool jacket and then cabbing back to East 84th Street, and then he suddenly felt a warm surge of relief settle over him, which was very much like having her back. He could postpone his suffering for a night. Why the heck not? He suddenly felt good, better than he had in weeks, and he went back to his bathroom to shave and dress and put on his best game face. First arriving were the Willises, a sports writer for the New York Times, and his wife Sabrina, who lived in a small